whole aspect of taking some footage and cutting it to make it into a story has a lot of appeal for me. The most important part of any film is the editing, because without editors' skill and precision and sharp eye, a film wouldn't be what it is today. Looking into the development of a film, I want to know where editing started. Who invented it? What is the point of editing? Well, all these factors we will cover in this documentary. The first motion picture was created by Edward Muybridge, who decided to place the camera by a racetrack and take 15 photos of a horse. He then combined the photos together and was left with a moving image. 4 years later, that's when the Lumiere brothers created the cinematograph. This was a device that would project images onto a screen for a paying audience. The first screening was in a Paris cafe in 1895. In the audience, there was a man named Georges Méliès. Méliès later became one of the first editors. Originally, Méliès would try to wow the audience by taking footage and cutting large chunks out of it to make it look like an illusion. He even managed to duplicate in one of his productions the one-man band. After a while, he gained a wide range of editing techniques which later became handy in his production A Trip to the Moon. This was considered to be one of the first sci-fi films and one of the treasures of early cinema. Back then, most productions were put on for show and not for the actual storytelling. One of the first people to enhance through storytelling was Edwin S. Porter. Porter was one of the first people to use parallel editing, which showed two different scenes happening in two different places. One of the main factors of the change of technique in editing is that nowadays we tend to cut more quickly in our productions. We tend to cause more of a reaction to the audience by showing various scenes in the space of 3 seconds, whereas, back when editing first started, they were focused on the same scene for about 7 minutes. Throughout time, this did change, and that aspect of speeding up cuts and jumping into other clips did improve, and was shown on many following productions, but this did mainly come in after 1910. The editing style nowadays is more relevant to the scene. We figured out that by speeding things up or slowing things down did actually benefit the production. This created more tension in the production because it meant that the audience could see what was happening in two different scenes. One of the people who is responsible for most of the modern day editing techniques is D.W. Griffith. He is best known for cutting between different shot types with different levels of importance. He used jump cuts and dissolves to show the passing of time. Later on, the Steenbeck flatbed editor was created. This was where footage and a soundtrack could be placed next door to each other and edited side by side whilst be playing on a screen. In America, editing was considered to be women's work, much like sewing and knitting. As editing was becoming more and more advanced in old films, computers were finally invented. This was one of the biggest developments in editing. True digital filmmaking didn't start until the release of Avid 1 in 1898. This helped editors cut any part of a film at any given point. It also meant that editors could make clips shorter or longer to how they liked it. Since Avid 1, a whole string of different editing softwares have been invented. By having all of these modern day editing softwares, it has allowed more freedom and creativity with editing. Most of the softwares are being used to this day: Final Cut Pro, iMovie, Premiere Pro, and Windows Movie Maker. These are just some of the examples. One editor who is really fascinating was a man I briefly spoke about earlier, Georges Méliès. The 3 productions of his that are most interesting are A Trip to the Moon, The Eclipse, and Le Voyage à travers l'Impossible, or in English, The Impossible Voyage. After analysing these 3 clips, I noticed that there was a common so-called technique between them all. The first point was that most of the scenes ended up with a fade to black. Others think Méliès did this in order to cause more of a dramatic effect with the audience, but from internet research, it was just a way to signify the ending of a scene. The second point is the lack of camera angles. This is understandable, as cameras weren't really as developed back then, and they didn't really understand the point of storytelling. Editing was used mostly as an illusion to swap back between scenes, so each production was more like someone filming a play rather than a film. As film progresses, an editor's role is becoming much more advanced, as they are one of the key elements in making any production. A really fascinating point I find with editors are that they actually used a lot with the director and the screenwriter in the early process of the planning part. One of the modern editors I looked into was John Gilbert, who has his own unique input to editing. With his personal touch on editing, it has brought him to win many awards. One of those was a BAFTA for his film Hacksaw Ridge. Gilbert is best known for his majestic touch on editing and his precision. One of the main points he makes in an interview is that the emotion of a scene is down to how the editor puts the clips together, and the effect that is felt by the audience is down to the editor, which is all part to how a film is constructed, which I think is the key aspect of any filmmaking. Throughout time, editing has developed so much. With our modern day softwares like Final Cut Pro, iMovie, Premiere Pro, and Windows Movie Maker, we're allowed to do so much with our productions. Looking towards the future, who knows what editing will be like 20 years from now.